Lawyers of Reddit, what was your "oh, I'm definitely winning this one" moment? I had a client who had a pretty severe slip and falls in a pharmacy. In my state, we are not allowed to see surveillance of the subject until after the deposition or other similar testimony is taken. The rule is in place to protect defendants, so we don't coach the client based on what we see in the video. Anyway, we take the deposition, then they send the video. Not 30 minutes later I get a call from opposing counsel wanting to settle. The video revealed that my client had fallen, passed out and peed herself. She was very elderly, and very hurt. The manager of the store had an employee put signs out showing the wet floor, and mop up around the lady. All while she was unconscious, all before calling 911. Settled that one for the policy limits right there. I can't really say I'm proud of this one, it's not a happy case, but it was a pretty sure winner. I represented a client once who had gone through a really rough marriage/divorce several years prior. Child drowned, a couple of miscarriages, the wife developed postpartum on one, which amplified an existing mental illness. Incredibly sad story. At the time I came into the story, the ex-wife had been in jail for several years, stalking her ex-husband initially, but was still being held because she wasn't competent to stand trial, and I was representing the ex-husband, who just wanted authorization to take over the sale of the house so they could finally finish severing ties. Prior to the trial, the wife's pro se briefs made it seem like she was under the impression they were going to relitigate the divorce, filled with allegations related to the marriage itself. Like I said up thread, she already had mental problems, and it was clear she'd picked up some soft CIT tendencies during her ongoing incarceration. When it actually came to trial and she was brought in, you could tell she was clearly not well. She was having a conversation with herself while my client was on the stand giving his explanation of the situation. We didn't really have any witnesses to speak of, this was hardly a major matter, so the ex-wife gave her side after that, and that's when the wheels fell off. She basically went on as she had in her briefs, rambling about the divorce itself, claiming my client had committed adultery and therefore she was entitled to 100% of all assets, aforementioned soft CIT stuff, some general babbling, etc. The judge we had was a nice guy, for which I'm forever grateful. He was patient with her, kind, reminded her that the initial divorce wasn't the issue, but generally just let her continue to speak her piece for a bit. After a few minutes, he gently shut her down, had the bailiff and guards lead her away, and gave us the authorization. As I said, it's not a happy "oh Lord, we're so going to win this case," just a sad situation, but it was probably my surest winner other than default judgments. I was defending a company being sued for kicking a customer out for being drunk. He showed up to trial, small claims, wasted at 10 a.m. The judges in small claims are lenient on the process, they like to adjudicate on the merits. So we started. He's the plaintiff, so he goes first. Can barely stand during his opening statement. Knocks over his shopping bag full of evidence. Just awful. The court put a stop to it and ruled in my client's favor. The only words I spoke were putting my name on the record. When the judge keeps on questioning the other side repeatedly, without me needing to say or submit anything. Definitely have a lot of those moments, especially when you have a tight case, or when the other side's arguments are too flimsy. Opposing party, mom, stands up while the justice is speaking, interrupts, and says I can't force my children to do something they don't want to do. For context, the justice was talking about how dad, my client, needed to have some parenting time. Mom had alienated the kids and was claiming that they didn't want to see him. Opposing counsel, who had most definitely not anticipated her client doing this, just lowers her head and closes her eyes. I stand up and say if mom can't control her children, then perhaps she should not be the primary parent. The justice replies, and I'll be available to hear it when you make that application, Mr. Leoflaw. That said, I knew I had one when mom stood up earlier and questioned the qualifications of the psychologist she had suggested when said psychologist came back with a report that my client should have parenting time. I was representing a rental company for homes. I had to present a case where I had to prove the tenants had been using the house they had rented for an illegal weed farm. They claimed they did have weed in the house, but only for their own recreational use. Apparently there's such a thing as a weed expert, and I asked him to testify about how much weed is considered normal for a joint, how many joints per day a regular user would smoke, etc. Little weed facts, so to speak. With his written testimony I did the math, which I presented during my end statement. With all the weed they had lying around, even if the couple smoked 18 heavy joints a day, per person, they had enough for 10 years. That ain't recreational, folks. I knew I had them when I heard the bailiff snort when I presented the numbers. The client was a private shuttle bus company that was contracted by the publicly funded regional transit company to pick up elderly and disabled customers, done on a reservation system. The client was sued by a woman alleging that the client didn't pick her up when she called, which was true. She would never make a reservation, instead of treating the service like a taxi, and as a result, she had to hitchhike into town and stay in a shelter overnight. She claimed that at the shelter someone bit a chunk of her arm off, and sued the client for $25,000, small claims maximum. I brought an application to dismiss before this went to trial on the basis that the woman's claim was bound to fail. Google the doctrine of remoteness, among other things. At the application, the woman wore short sleeves. Her arms appeared unbitten, signal one this was going my client's way. She argued that claim wasn't really about the money or the chunk missing from her arm, but instead she wanted the judge to order that my client pick her up whenever she calls. Signal 2, admitting your claim is bogus to the judge is not a good strategy. I obviously objected and argued that this was not the case she brought, and the judge must dismiss. The judge said to the woman, I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Dorcas, what would you say in response to his submission? The woman then lost it on the judge. Signal 3, called her a racist. That's a bold strategy, Cotton, let's see if it pays off, yelled and swore at her, and said her human rights were being violated. The judge was visibly pissed and ordered the woman's case dismissed. I could see the judge gritting her teeth, so I decided to swing for the fences. I asked for an additional order that the woman not be allowed to start any other action against my client without first getting the permission of the court. Essentially, I asked for an order that is usually awarded against people who repeatedly, and baselessly, sued the same defendant. This was the first time the woman sued my client. The judge agreed that such an order would be appropriate, and granted it on the spot. I don't think it helped that the woman was continuing to swear at me and the judge throughout this time. I was trying a civil case in New Hampshire in front of a salt of the earth jury. In the back row were 4 women. I called a witness who was an assistant town clerk. She came in without a subpoena voluntarily while on maternity leave. She left her baby at home. She was a lovely, well-spoken, and articulate woman who oozed credibility and likability. Her evidence was useful to us but shouldn't have been fatal to the other side's case. After my direct exam, the other lawyer decides to tear into her with largely irrelevant questions in the harshest, most rude way possible. After one question which reeked of his assholery, the 4 ladies in the back row all were rolling their eyes and looking at each other as if to say, you believe this shit? It was right then and there I knew we were winning that one. Hit and run. My client was the one who got hit. Defendant's defense was, it may have been my car, but I had reported it stolen and it wasn't me behind the wheel of the car. During my client's examination in chief. Me, what were you doing at that time? Client, I was waiting for the pedestrian light to turn green so that I could cross the street on the zebra crossing. Me, and did you wait for the light to turn green before crossing? Client, yes. The light turned green, and I waited a few seconds before crossing the street. Right then and there, the defendant jumps up and roars across the courtroom, my light was green to go. That bloody fucking liar dashed across the street. A lot of my family are personal injury lawyers. Most of the time when people fake injuries they then post pictures on their social media disproving it. One that sticks out was someone claiming injury in a car crash, I think severe neck and or back pain, and then posted pictures skiing. Overall, if you say you can't do XYZ, make sure no photographic proof of you doing then, they can and will subpoena social media places, so even having an account set to private won't help. The truck driver changed his story on the stand about how the accident happened from what he had always said previously. Next on the stand, the police officer who had responded to the scene gives this new version too. I asked him on the cross when he heard this new version, and he said, in the hallway just before I came in. Oh, I'm definitely winning this one. I'm an appellate criminal defense attorney, which means I take the case after the defendant has been convicted/sentenced, and I try to convince a court of appeals that he deserves to be released from prison/get a new trial/get a new sentence. I had one case a few weeks ago that was a total travesty of justice. Black client tried by an all-white jury, not even a single minority in the entire venire, defended incompetently by a shit trial attorney who did absolutely nothing for him. Who then got convicted on all counts and received an extremely high sentence for a relatively piddling fraud, higher than Manafort got. I raised 5 different issues on appeal, which is a lot. Typically I keep it to 1 issue or maybe 2. At oral argument, the judges on the panel seemed pretty sympathetic during my presentation, though they asked me some tough questions. After I sat down, the government lawyer went up to speak. Before she got a word out, the first thing the judge said was, "This is like a law school exam, there are so many issues here." I had a pretty good feeling I'd win after that one. And indeed they ended up reversing all of his convictions and my client is now a free man. Family law case. I'm just a paralegal but I accompany the lawyers to a court, or did anyway. Woman, our client who is divorced, father not paying child support, he is always claiming poor mouth, saying he has no money, etc., always getting an extension to his money owed. He had a business but said it was doing terribly and he was owing money left and right, etc. Judges had been sympathetic in the past. However, guy comes in, he owed $36K now, for 5 or 6 years back child support, claiming poor mouth once again. Swears to the court he has no money, business isn't going well, shows bank statements. Attorney whips out Facebook post copy. I found, my brightest moment, guy's young hot fiancée, with her new $20,000 ring, 5.5 carats, and her post saying look what my sugar daddy bought me, and he paid cash, eat your heart out ladies. The guy looked like his life had ended. We got our full amount plus interest. And I got a 1K bonus. Turns out he was taking business money and never depositing it, so it wouldn't show on the books. So company looked like it was doing terrible, when in fact was doing great. In a later investigation his business partner sued him and won and the business went under. For those asking, it was a bar room. And also, I hate family law, it's usually that the scumbag wins, or gets away with crap for so long, male or female. Thank you for watching Reddit Space. Please subscribe if you love these Reddit stories.